The world woke up to headlines screaming, "Israel attacks Iran." But behind those bold letters, behind the flashing images on your screen, hides a story most will never dare to tell. A story wrapped in decades of fear, silent deals, secret meetings, and the kind of power struggle that shapes the fate of entire nations. This is not just another conflict. This is a collision of history and ambition, of survival and dominance, of fear disguised as defense. What you're about to hear goes far beyond the missiles, beyond the politics, beyond the carefully scripted speeches. You are about to enter the mind of nations, to witness the raw, unfiltered truth they never wanted the world to see. Because when a superpower strikes, it's not always about the target. Sometimes it's about what they're desperately trying to protect. And when fear begins to lose its grip, even the most powerful will gamble everything to maintain control. Tonight, I will take you behind the curtain, behind the headlines, into the very heart of why Israel attacked Iran. Not the version they want you to believe, the real version. And once you hear it, you will never see this conflict the same way again. Stay with me, because the truth begins right now. Israel's fear of Iran is not just rooted in weapons or military strength. It's something far more powerful: ideology. Iran represents a vision of the Middle East that completely opposes Israel's existence and its current dominance in the region. For Israel, Iran is not simply another nation with military capabilities. It is a revolutionary force that inspires resistance across the Muslim world. Iran's growing influence means that more nations, more groups, and more people begin to challenge Israel's authority, its policies, and its very foundation. This is not a war of missiles alone. It's a war of ideas, of hearts, of loyalties. As Iran strengthens its ties with nations and movements throughout the Middle East, it builds a web of influence that threatens to encircle Israel. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, groups in Iraq, Syria, and even inside Palestine, all are directly or indirectly supported by Iran. This network creates constant pressure on Israel's border. Every new Iranian alliance chips away at Israel's control, turning regional dynamics against it. Israel has long benefited from being the dominant power in a divided Middle East, but Iran is slowly changing that game, fostering unity among groups that share its vision of opposing Western-backed dominance. What terrifies Israel even more is that Iran's message resonates with oppressed people far beyond its borders. The oppressed see Iran as a symbol of defiance against Western occupation, colonialism, and injustice. This gives Iran a soft power that no missile can match. As Iran's reach grows, Israel fears losing not just its military edge, but its psychological advantage. The narrative of being the eternal victim, surrounded by hostile forces, begins to weaken as more voices rise against it. This ideological rise of Iran challenges the very identity of Israel as the sole dominant force in the region. It forces Israel to act, to strike preemptively, not just to destroy weapons, but to crush a growing idea. Because when an idea spreads, borders mean nothing. That's the war Israel fears the most. Israel's deepest fear has always been Iran's nuclear ambition. This is not just about one bomb or one facility. This is about survival. In the heart of Israel's leadership, there exists a constant anxiety that if Iran ever crosses the threshold of becoming a nuclear-armed state, the entire balance of power in the Middle East would tilt forever. The concept of deterrence changes. For the first time in its history, Israel would face a rival capable of matching its most secretive, most powerful threat. It is not just military destruction they fear, it is the destruction of psychological superiority. The very notion of being untouchable vanishes. With nuclear capability, Iran could embolden its allies, strengthen its proxies, and silence the diplomatic pressure that has long been used against it. Countries that once hesitated to challenge Israel might find new courage under the protective umbrella of a nuclear Iran. And beyond the politics and strategies lies the ultimate terror, the fear of annihilation. The historical trauma that shapes Israel's national psyche makes the idea of a nuclear Iran unbearable. The haunting memory of genocide fuels an absolute refusal to allow any power to hold such destructive capability near its borders. Israel doesn't see Iran's nuclear program as a distant possibility. It sees it as an approaching nightmare. Every enrichment facility, every centrifuge spinning in Iranian labs is viewed not just as technology, but as a ticking clock counting down to disaster. This is why Israel has repeatedly carried out covert operations, assassinations, cyber attacks, and sabotage within Iran. It is a desperate attempt to delay the inevitable, because once Iran reaches nuclear capability, Israel's long-standing military dominance dissolves. The region enters a new era where Israel no longer dictates the rules, but instead must live in constant negotiation with a rival holding equal power. That is a reality Israel refuses to accept. Iran's strategy has never relied solely on its own borders or conventional military strength. Instead, it has built a complex web of proxy forces across the region that serve as both a shield and a sword against its adversaries, especially Israel, through groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, various militias in Iraq, and influential ties in Syria and Palestine. Iran has effectively surrounded Israel with hostile forces capable of striking from multiple fronts. This network allows Iran to apply constant indirect pressure on Israel without engaging in direct warfare, making it extremely difficult for Israel to respond without escalating into a broader regional conflict. These proxies serve multiple purposes. They drain Israel's military resources, keep its population under constant fear of attacks, and force it to remain on high alert along several borders at once. Hezbollah alone, heavily armed and deeply entrenched in southern Lebanon, represents a significant military threat, with its stockpile of thousands of missiles capable of reaching deep into Israeli territory. For Israel, the danger is not just in the physical weapons, but in the unpredictability of these proxy forces. Iran can activate or intensify their operations based on shifting geopolitical needs, turning them into strategic pressure points. This creates a state of permanent tension for Israel, where peace can be shattered at any moment from multiple directions. The longer Iran nurtures these alliances, the more deeply embedded its influence becomes in the heart of the Middle East political and military landscape. For Israel, dismantling these networks is nearly impossible. Without igniting a war that could spiral out of control, every move against one proxy risks triggering responses from others, creating a dangerous domino effect. This sophisticated proxy strategy allows Iran to project power far beyond its borders, keeping Israel trapped in a cycle of defense and retaliation. Israel knows that as these alliances grow stronger, its own strategic position weakens. The fear is not just of one enemy, but of an expanding circle of hostility that could one day close in with overwhelming force. That looming reality pushes Israel toward preemptive actions, desperate to break the growing chain before it becomes unbreakable. For decades, Israel has relied heavily on its close relationship with the United States and the broader Western alliance to maintain its military, economic, and diplomatic superiority. But the world is shifting. Emerging global alliances are redrawing the power map, and Israel sees the danger in these shifting sands. The rise of blocs like BRICS, where Iran finds a welcoming seat alongside major players like China, Russia, and others, presents a serious challenge to Israel's historical position. Iran's deepening ties with China promised new economic lifelines, advanced technology, and strong diplomatic support. Russia's partnership offers military collaboration, intelligence sharing, and geopolitical leverage, especially in sensitive regions like Syria. Even within the Arab world, where Israel once counted on divisions and hostilities to keep Iran isolated, new understandings are beginning to form as some Gulf nations reassess their long-term interests. The United States, once the unquestioned protector of Israel, is facing its own internal challenges and global fatigue, forcing it to reassess how deeply it wants to entangle itself in Middle Eastern conflicts. As American priorities shift towards the Pacific, domestic issues and economic inside Israel, not everything is as unified as it may seem on the outside. Over the past few years, the country has been facing a growing storm of internal unrest, from political instability and corruption scandals to massive protests in the streets and heated divisions over judicial reforms. Israel has been grappling with a deeply fractured society. Citizens are divided over the direction of the government, the role of religion in politics, the rights of minorities, and the occupation of Palestinian territories. Trust in leadership is wavering, and the once solid ground of national unity is beginning to shake. In times like these, leaders throughout history have often resorted to a familiar tactic, diverting the public's attention outward, creating an external enemy to rally against, and in doing so, unifying a divided population under the banner of security. Israel's strike on Iran must be viewed through this lens. It wasn't just about external threats or regional power games. It was also a strategic distraction. When a nation's streets are filled with angry citizens demanding change, an outside conflict can quickly become the glue that holds the internal cracks together. The language of fear is powerful. The threat of war has a way of silencing dissent, even if only temporarily. In the wake of the attack, protests die down. Criticism is labeled unpatriotic. The news cycle shifts. The people who were once shouting in the streets are suddenly tuning in to emergency broadcasts, looking toward the skies instead of their government. This isn't just a coincidence. It's calculated. The Israeli leadership understands the weight of fear and how it can be used to regain control. A strike on Iran isn't just a message to Tehran. It's a message to Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem. It says, we are under threat. We must stand together. And in that atmosphere, political divisions are blurred. People stop questioning policy and start pledging loyalty. It's a move pulled straight from the playbook of regimes across history. When the domestic house is burning, point to a fire outside and make the people believe it's bigger. It creates a temporary silence, a pause in the storm, but it doesn't solve the deeper issues. The irony is that while the leadership tries to unify the public through fear, the people slowly begin to recognize the pattern. They begin to question why military action always comes when political pressure is highest. They start to connect the dots between foreign aggression and domestic discontent. A nation cannot distract its citizens forever, and each time it tries, it takes a greater risk that the next conflict will not just be symbolic or strategic, but catastrophic. Israel's attack on Iran may have bought its leaders time, but it came at the cost of escalating a regional conflict and at the risk of awakening a public that's growing tired of war being used to hide the truth at home. Israel's strike on Iran appeared to many as an act of sovereign will, a bold decision to neutralize a growing threat. But beneath the surface, the fingerprints of Western interests were hard to ignore. For decades, Israel has been more than just a regional player. It has functioned as a forward post of Western influence in the Middle East. Its military decisions, strategic posturing, and foreign policy objectives are often aligned with those of the United States and its allies. When Israel moves, the world watches not just what it does, but who supports it silently in the background. The attack on Iran, while carried out by Israeli forces, was not born in a vacuum. It came after years of coordinated intelligence sharing, diplomatic maneuvering, and shared anxieties between Israel and the West over Iran's growing influence and defiance. The West, particularly the United States, views Iran not just as a geopolitical rival, but as an ideological threat. Iran represents a model of resistance against the Western-designed order in the region. It refuses to be controlled, to be sanctioned into submission, or to adopt a client-state posture like so many others. This defiance is dangerous to a global system that relies on obedience. And so, whenever Israel positions itself aggressively toward Iran, Western governments issue statements of support, quietly approve military assistance, or simply look the other way when red lines are crossed. The strike may have had the Israeli flag on it, but it carried the weight of years of silent endorsement. It was a strike that served multiple interests: Israel's immediate goal of disrupting Iran's growth, and the West's longer game of containing an independent regional power. This coordination doesn't always come in the form of open collaboration. Sometimes it's a shared understanding, a diplomatic wink, a subtle green light, a delay in condemnation that speaks louder than words. When Israel struck, it knew there would be no serious consequence from its allies. No sanctions, no embargoes, no international trials. Instead, it would receive the usual chorus of justification: self-defense, counterterrorism, regional stability. Meanwhile, if Iran were to retaliate with similar force, it would be condemned as a destabilizer, a sponsor of terror, a threat to peace. This imbalance reveals the deeper layers of global politics, where some nations are allowed to act outside the rules because they are seen as part of the rule-making club. Israel knows this, and so do its allies. The silence of the West in the face of such aggression isn't neutrality. It's a message to Iran and to every other nation watching. Power speaks louder than law, and alliances matter more than justice. Israel's attack, therefore, was not just a single act of aggression. It was part of a broader strategy to uphold a regional order that keeps Western interests intact and Iran contained. It was a message delivered through missiles, but written by decades of partnership, fear, and the unwillingness of the powerful to let go of control. Beneath all the politics, beyond the missiles and military reports, lies a truth Israel fears more than any weapon in Iran's arsenal: the emergence of a united resistance. For decades, Israel has operated in a fragmented region, where sectarian divides, political rivalries, and national self-interest kept its adversaries from forming a coherent front. Shia and Sunni tensions were exploited, Arab and Persian mistrust remained high, and resistance movements were isolated, lacking coordination or common direction. This division allowed Israel to confront its enemies one by one, to contain them in silos, and to act with confidence that they would never become one voice. But that landscape is changing, and Israel knows it. A growing sense of solidarity is rising across borders and ideology. Iran is playing a central role in this shift, not just with weapons or money, but with a message of standing up against occupation, against imperialism, and against a global system that favors the oppressor. For the first time in recent memory, resistance movements across the region are not just speaking in the same tone. They're beginning to speak in unison. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, factions in Syria, and even groups within Palestine are no longer operating as disconnected entities. Through shared intelligence, coordinated messaging, and a common sense of purpose, they're forming something Israel has long worked to prevent. A regional resistance axis that transcends borders and sectarian lines. This isn't just about ideology, it's about momentum. Israel understands that a united resistance, no matter how asymmetrical in conventional military terms, poses a different kind of threat. It's a threat that cannot be bombed into silence or isolated by sanctions. It's a network. It's a spirit. It's a movement, built not on one leader or one group, but on generations of shared pain and rising clarity. The strike on Iran, then, was more than a military calculation. It was an attempt to break this momentum, to remind Iran that leading such a resistance comes at a cost. To warn others in the region that aligning too closely with Tehran could bring fire to their own doorsteps. But in doing so, Israel may have done the opposite. Every attack, every assassination, every strike meant to weaken Iran's standing only strengthens the resolve of those who see Israel as an occupier and oppressor. It adds fuel to the very fire Israel is trying to put out. The fear is not that Iran will destroy Israel overnight. The fear is that Iran will keep lighting torches, one in Beirut, one in Baghdad, one in Gaza, until the region no longer sees itself as divided, until resistance becomes not the act of the few, but the identity of the many. A unity built not in palaces or war rooms, but in refugee camps and occupied streets, and in the hearts of those who have been waiting, watching, and remembering. The strike was meant to silence, but it may have awakened something far greater than any army, an unshakable, collective will. This wasn't just about missiles. It wasn't just about a single night of fire in the sky. Israel's attack on Iran revealed something far deeper, an unraveling fear of losing control. For decades, power, alliances, and silence helped protect a narrative where Israel stood as the dominant force and Iran was cast as the eternal threat. But now, that story is cracking. Iran is no longer isolated. The region is no longer divided as it once was. From Baghdad to Beirut, from Gaza to Sana'a, voices once scattered are finding rhythm. And that rhythm is starting to sound like resistance. Not blind hatred, not chaos, but a shared refusal to remain silent under injustice. This strike was never just about defense, it was about disruption, about trying to stop something that can't be stopped with airstrikes, unity, momentum, and awakening. It was about preserving a fragile superiority that has started to slip. But here's the truth. Bombs can destroy buildings, not belief. Missiles can silence a city, not a message. What was exposed that day was not just Israel's military strategy, it was its deepest fear. A fear that justice is not on its side anymore. A fear that the oppressed are becoming one voice, and that voice is growing louder by the hour. To every listener who walked through these truths with open eyes and an open heart, thank you. May you carry forward not just information but insight. May you question what you're told and stand where others remain silent. Because the world doesn't need more noise, it needs more truth. Stay awake, stay strong, and may justice always guide your steps. Good luck, and never stop listening.